Welcome to the Warrior Razor podcast. We're your hosts, Angela
and Kerry.
We all need help and support to stay future focused and challenged to courageously pursue the life God has called us to live. What we do matters.
Here on the Warrior Razor podcast, we seek Jesus first and use the skills, talents, and passions he has given us second. Hey everyone, Kerry here. I'm super excited to get to introduce today's guest. Today on our show, we have my good friend, Sarah Burnett. Sarah is the co-founder and COO of Flourish, which is a nonprofit operating system that optimizes the way nonprofits and volunteers work together to make a difference. Along with her husband, she's also helped develop Sermon.tech, which is an AI platform that summarizes sermon messages, generates discussion questions for them, as well as summaries, and creates beautiful group guide pages to share out in just minutes. So amazing. You know, Sarah, she's doing amazing things over in the tech world, which admittedly, she will say is never where she saw herself, but she's doing amazing things. And I'm so excited for you to listen to her. And I say that and kind of emphasize this tech world piece because that's not where I met Sarah. I met Sarah in the church planting world. First and foremost, she loves Jesus and everything she does is in him and through him and for him. And that's where her first love begins. And she actually, even in starting that church, started their children's ministry, was an instrumental part in a ministry for women in church planting, which is where I met her. And she started a podcast for that group, which even though she's not leading that podcast anymore, that podcast is still going strong. So Sarah is a starter. She is someone that you want to hear from because she has had lots of transition in her life and had lots of moments to learn how to trust God. And I think we can learn a lot from her. Sarah and her husband, Josh, have been married for almost 18 years now, and they have 3 children, Savannah, who's 14, Grady, he's 11, and Maddie, she's 10. They live in Annapolis, Maryland, and they've got pretty much a farm with 1 dog, 2 cats, 1 cat, 2 bunnies, and a full fish tank. I'm excited for you to learn from Sarah, so let's go ahead and get to that. Here is our interview with Sarah Burnett. Well, Sarah, we are so excited to have you on the podcast, and we've given our listeners the more formal bio before this in our introduction, but we want to hear a little bit more and just from your mouth, that kind of 10,000 foot overview of who Sarah is, anything you'd like us to know, hobbies, likes, dislikes, family, just tell us who you are.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for having me for the first, time here on the podcast. I'm really grateful to be here. So I try to come up with some fun things to share.
Perfect.
And so I decided to go with 3 random facts about me. So
let's hear it.
So first, I've been skydiving.
Nice.
I married my
horrifying.
I married my high school sweetheart.
Adorable.
I first met in 6th grade throwing spitwads or shooting spitwads. And I was typically the smallest kid at camp. And so I absolutely loved to go on the blob and be blobbed as high as I could go. So I just thought those were kind of fun and would probably give you a really good picture of who I am. I'm very fun-loving and adventurous and just like to go for it. So
are you still short? I
am still very short. I am 5 feet and a quarter inch. And
you are?
Yeah, quarter. Gotta. My daughter's like, I think you're 5 feet and a half inch. And I was like, I don't know, because the doctor recently told her she was 5 foot and a quarter, and she's like, but I'm not as tall as you. And I'm like, well, maybe I grew. You never know.
It's always hope.
Exactly. I'm taller than my sister, who's 4'11". So I'm very grateful for that.
You're a tiny crew. Okay, good.
Exactly.
Those are fun. I love it.
Those are fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just to kind of give you an overview, I grew up as one of 6. I am smack in the middle. I have 2 older brothers, and I have a younger sister and 2 younger brothers. One who I hope to meet when I get to heaven. So I have one of 5 living siblings. I grew up in a Christian home and kind of spent most of my days growing up barefoot, playing basketball, fishing in my pond behind my house, and always making up new games for me and my siblings to get chores done. Thanks. I was like, I was always coming up with like a new game to get to. I still do that with my kids. So I have 3 kids. I'm obviously married still. Hopefully that's true. No, it is. For 18 years, it'll be this summer. And then we have a 14-year-old daughter, Savannah, an 11-year-old son named Grady, and a 10-year-old girl named Madeline. So we have very full house on that front. I always like to say I'm a recently declared introvert. I'm an INFJ, which is apparently the most extroverted of introverts. So therein lies the confusion.
So this was a new finding for you? You always thought you were an extrovert?
I did. Yeah. I mean, from high school, we took the Myers-Briggs, I remember in high school, and thinking I was an ENFJ, taking it again in college, an ENFJ. And then I've taken it several times with, we've church planted here in Annapolis in 2010. And I took it again for all the assessment stuff, ENFJ. And through the pandemic, one of my friends was like, I really think you ought to take it again. And I was like, okay. And she didn't say anything like, I think you're an introvert or blah, blah, blah. But I was out of a lot of the roles that I had been playing. And when I took it again, I was like, oh, INFJ, weird, odd, huh? And it felt like it really fit me a lot better. And also I realized how much, I think through the pandemic, I really enjoyed that alone kind of time and space. And so recently
I think there's science behind that your personality can change a little bit, but I think it's the temperament that stays the same. So I'd be interested.
Yeah.
I think that's interesting you say that, Sarah, because I actually had a conversation about this with a friend. I've had several of my extrovert friends recently come out as introverts. And so I'm like, what is going on, my extroverted friends? But I think like when we were younger and took those tests, like it was praised to be an extrovert. Exactly. And I think like we had some kind of weird psyche or weird, like, I don't want to be an introvert.
Wiring.
So, we kind of tried to stay away from that. And I don't understand why, but I think
it was like,
several of us like are like that.
I feel like it was like synonymous with being shy. And it's like, oh, I'm not shy at all. I actually am not at all. But I always tell my kids, I'm like, it's about how you get your energy. If you get it from being alone or you get it from being with people. And my oldest gets it from being with people. My my son gets it from being alone. He had the best line during COVID. He was like, kids would come knock on the door to play, and he's like, I think I'm going to have a social distance day today. I was like, I love you. He's just like so polite. And I'm like, I just think I'm going to have a social distance day today.
Even the extroverts, I was at an event this past weekend and I literally drove home in silence because I was just, it was a lot of talking. It was a lot of people, which I love and I recharge from, but then it's like, I have hit capacity. So we got off on this one, but continue on with your.
Oh, you're fine. I'm like, I think I covered most of it. I think I did say my husband and I planted a church here in Annapolis, which is where we live right now, in 2010, originally from Louisville, Kentucky. So therein lies the pond and the playing basketball and all of that. I was going to say I can keep going, but we handed off the leadership of our church back in 2018. And I think that's part of where we're a lot of small beginnings, new beginning things. But we handed that off to start a tech company called Flourish. So
that's where, and that's where we're headed today. So Sarah and I met while you were in church planting, because that's what I do as well. I've helped to plant a church that I'm currently still on staff at. And you and I met in a group that was for women who were part of church planting in whatever aspect that was, as a spouse, as a planter, as a staff member. And I remember you and I just kind of took to each other right away. A lot of similarities in our personalities and then the way we handle things and do things. And our friendship started there. And so it was shocked, I think, for a lot of people. And when we knew that you, as a planter, you were stepping down, you guys were stepping down to do that. But it's like, okay, so what are they doing now, kind of thing? And there's a little bit of like, what's their next step? What are they doing? And you have stepped into this new world that, listen, church planters are entrepreneurs at heart. That you have to be a starter when you're starting a church. There's absolutely commonality with that and like starting a business. So it's not too foreign. It's not like, something that is completely out of your wheelhouse, but you did go from planning a church to like a tech company. So it's so wild. And I love that. So tell us about that. What was that process like as you transitioned from being a church planter to moving into this tech world, and tell us all about like what Flourish actually is and what business you provide to the world.
Yeah, sure. I'll start with that and then kind of work backwards.
Sure.
So we took this kind of huge leap, the beginning of 2019, to start a tech company called Flourish, which exists to optimize the way people and nonprofits work together to make a difference. So really, we want to help people find that cross section of like who they are and what they're passionate about, and put that energy to work in the community. So that really started out of our church plant in so many ways. It was funny. We actually found a picture of Josh and I back when we were like in high school serving with this group that he started called History. There's a little theme here, History Makers. And it was all about serving in the community. So cool. I knew kind of from the start that he wanted to plant a church. Since he was 15, he had felt that call. And obviously we started dating in high school when we were 16. And so I was like, that sounds super adventurous and really fun and really cool. And I've always just had a heart to serve and, love people.
Yeah.
And fast forward, we started the church out of doing a community needs and assets assessment, which basically you just go in the community, figure out and talk to people, all kinds of people, government, teachers, business people. What are the needs of the city? What are the assets here? And really go in with a heart to say, we don't want to come in and just say, we know what you need, but we want to listen and we want to hear, what do you need? What are the ways that we could, as a church, help meet needs that maybe are being unmet, and serve our community in a way that truly is good news and brings the kingdom here to earth. So with all of that, we did a lot of really neat things. A lot of we really zeroed in on food and food insecurity in our city, which some people might be surprised. And Annapolis kind of is known for several things like the Naval Academy and sailboats and things like that. But there is definitely a hidden hunger need here in our community that is pretty severe. So we decided to kind of tackle that. We did a lot of relief-oriented work with that, but realized like there is a systemic thing that's kind of going on, that we're going to just keep on doing relief if we don't work on the overarching, systemic side of things. So as we began to approach that, we started really connecting people in our church with nonprofits here in the community to try to really plug our people into service in our community. And my husband was like, I'm trying to keep everybody in my head. I'm trying to figure out, all these people that I want to help get plugged in. And so he was like, how can we do that in a way that's like, has technology? We have always both loved technology. But he was like, it's a lot different to love technology and start a tech company. So I was going to say, your question about just sort of like how the details around like the transition and all of that, I would say he was had processed a bit more on that front, as far as feeling like something was calling him towards something in terms of Flourish. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what we called it. That was like our name for the project of like matching people to opportunities to serve in the community.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, I found myself just talking about that so much more often in my conversations. And I remember him coming home from a baseball game and he's like, I talked about Flourish in 3 separate conversations today.
Wow.
And he was like, and it was with ministry people. And he was like, it just makes me feel like that's what and he had a tug in his heart. Like you talked about your arrows and things like that. He was like, I feel like I'm an arrow that's just like taunt. Like, I know there's a direction in which I'm supposed to go, but having to be really patient to wait on like, where do you want me to go, Lord? And when he came home that day, he was like, I think that's where I'm supposed to aim the next season of my life.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, okay. He's like, what do you think about that? And I'm like, I was like, let me pray about it for a hot minute. And I really felt like an overwhelming sense of peace, to the point that I have said to many people, like, I knew I would need to come back to that moment of peace.
Yeah, that's
because
good.
I knew that it wouldn't be so easy, like going forward. And I'd probably question it like 1,000 times. Was that the right thing to do? But no, we quickly let our team know. And then we took about 6 months to transition and hand things off and identify the next leader. But I will say, for me, and I've shared this, I think, with you, Kerry, before, is like, it triggered a lot of grief for me, and maybe even too, I believe, some unprocessed grief. My dad passed away in 2015, and I had obviously grieved that at that time, at that moment, and in that season of my life for a good 6 months. I kind of stepped out of all of my ministry roles and things, but it did something to me that I was just
up.
I was like, whoa, I've got to
There's a lot of change.
It was a lot
that you were going through.
A lot of changing of what my role was going to be, who I was known as. I had been known for a long time in that space, as in the church planting space. And so there was just so much changing for me. And as much as I am adventurous, I'm like, I also, if you've ever done the disc, I am like a IS, which is more of a, not usually, you don't normally find those together, but I love structure. I love to build structure into place. And so I think, we can get into what I feel like in terms of that, in terms of my personality, but it's.
Well, I have a little bit of a question here, and it's,
sure.
This wasn't on what we kind of prompted you with, but you're in this church plant space. Your husband's been praying. He's been feeling this nudge to, like Kerry said, it's not so far off the mark because of the entrepreneurial spirit, but it's, I mean, you're leaving a church body that you helped plant the seed, helped nourish it, and it's starting to grow. How do you then deal with, I'm sure, and to be careful with, the audience, how do you take care of those tender hearts that might have been offended, might not have understood where you guys were changing? Because I feel like that's a big part of any big pivot that anybody in any line of work has to come to terms with, and 100%. The prayer behind it, and I think you hit the nail on the head with the peace component as well. But can you talk about how you navigated that? Probably, I don't know, I'm assuming the tumultuous waters that you experienced probably during that transition time.
Yeah, I'm happy to speak to that. I think it's always, hard when you make a big change, you make a change direction, because for whatever, I mean, we all love to think about the people in our lives, like continuing on that like trajectory, and whether we do it consciously or subconsciously, I think we all are like, they'll just keep doing the thing that they've always done. They'll be in my life forever. And never feel like they're supposed to do something different. And maybe that was at play in some people's minds and hearts. It was definitely hard on our closest friends, and who we handed our church off to. And I think they would be honest and say, yes, it was super hard on them. And it definitely took time to, in the moments that we were walking through that together, to try to walk in unity during that season as best that we possibly could, because we knew that it was like an opportunity for the church for the enemy to get in and, say all kinds of things to people. And certainly people have, I think, felt like, they connected with us better, or they connect with the new leaders better. There's always going to be a bit of that. But I think for our friendship, like that was the piece that was the hardest to navigate. And I will say that our friends and we stayed committed to being unified through that, even when we had to sit down and have a 5-hour long conversation together as couples to talk about how the process made us feel. And that was on the back side of handing everything off, but realizing like our friendship we need to have an honest conversation about all of the things, because we carry expectations with us, whether we verbally say it or not. Our hearts have expectations on how we'll be treated, or what people will say, or how things will go. And if those weren't met, how we react, and then how we react because of how they reacted. And so, it's tough to untangle. I am grateful that my friend was committed to like meeting with me every single week. Whether our husbands were great or we were great, we still continued to meet just to continue to be as honest as we could be in the moments. And then obviously as we had time to process.
That's good.
We had our 5-hour long conversation, and we continued to still support and talk. And
I think that's important when you look at someone's storyline. You're like, okay, they were doing this, and then fast forward on this timeline, and then here's the mark where they made the move. But there's a lot of stuff that happens in between those marks.
It really is.
I think it's helpful to share that piece, because it's the not so pretty parts of the story. And I think it's also encouraging to know that like you went in, prayed up, seeking peace, because you were dealing with other believers, and not everybody has that opportunity. But as far as it concerned you guys, you were doing your part to seek the peace. And I think that's says a lot. So that's awesome.
Thanks,
Well, and I think too, something that stands out to me is, and I think some of our audience might resonate with this. Entrepreneurs like to start things. So it's silly for us to think that our friends that are entrepreneurs and our starters are just going to stay somewhere forever. I think it's again, that unwritten expectation or unverbalized expectation we have. Like when you're a starter, like starters got to start, like we have to move on. We're constantly thinking of that next thing and moving to that next thing and passing the buck, not because we don't care for the people that helped us get there or care for the people that are
100%.
supporting us, but that's just the way God has made us, made those entrepreneurs. So it's like, let's celebrate that and let's work hard to keep the friendships, to keep the relationships, to center on Jesus, but to let entrepreneurs do the thing that God has created them to do.
That's good.
So if you are an entrepreneur that's wanting to like move to the next thing, remember that God has made you that way, and help people around you to celebrate that. And then do your part to help the transition be good for those people around you. Yes. But like, don't not move to the next thing because you're so worried about hurting someone else.
100%.
Because God has made you that way, and Jesus is asking you to go to the next thing. So just wanted to say
100%.
that.
No, that's so good, Kerry.
Yeah.
I'm like, yes.
It's hard. It's also hard.
So
like
hard.
Even those words coming out of my mouth, I realize just seriously how hard it is to be the one moving on, or to be the one who someone is moving on from. I've been in both of those spots, and it's so very hard. Like the truth is, God has made us to start things, move on, do the work, all that stuff.
Kerry, I think I shared this with you, and I think this will resonate with you too, Sarah, but I had in a ministry startup that I was a part of, I had a woman leave, and it was a volunteer position. So I wasn't really like holding her to some sort of standard. And I felt pretty abandoned in the middle of it. And I thought, ouch, that stinks. And that is not really fabulous because we're,
Mhm.
left to hold up our end of it too. But one of the things that she said to me is, I have to do my part to please God more than to please man. Now, the way the way she went about the exit strategy, it honestly wasn't ideal, and that's where our humanity gets in the middle of it. But it was a learning example for me to how to process leaving with excellence. And I just went through a transition personally too, and I was instantly reminded of that season. I mean, almost now 8 years ago, when I thought, okay, if I'm going to transition, I want to transition with excellence. Ultimately, I'm being turned in this new direction, kind of like what you said, you and your husband were being directed into a new season, not so far off the original mark, but I had to be responsible to be obedient to the Lord in that, but also to take care of the people that I was transitioning from. So I think that speaks a lot to your story too. So
no, that's super good, Angela. And just reminds me too of something I was like, where were you back in the early days of my counselor? Where were you back in the early days of church planting? But she told me, she was like, people are always doing their best to take care of themselves. And that has helped me a ton with how I process people leaving or going to the next thing, is like, oh, they're just doing their best to take care of themselves. And they may do it well, and they may do it in a way that's like, oh, ouch, that hurt. And don't know that that's necessarily their intention, although there may be other things that play. But for them being able to like remember that, people are just doing their best to take care of themselves.
And to give the grace in that space, because sure enough, we're going to have screwed it up somewhere too beforehand or in the future where we're like, oh, I'm going to need some grace too, because we don't get it perfectly either.
That's good.
100%.
That's good. Angela, do you want us to move us into our small beginnings conversation with Sarah?
Yeah, so we are in a series currently about small beginnings and how it's kind of benchmarked on the Zechariah 4:10 passage about not despising the small beginnings, and that the Lord rejoices to see the work begin. And it's reference to this plumb line that was in, I love this guy's name, Zerubbabel's hand, and it was a tool of measuring. It wasn't the final nail in the wall or the final stone in the wall. It was the tool to see the work begin that God rejoiced over. So will you take us on this pathway for your small beginnings when you made this decision, we're going to turn this ship in a new direction. We're going from church planters to now tech startups. You had the common denominator and the theme with Flourish and partnering the two entities together. But walk us through this pathway of what the small beginnings look like, because I'm sure it was a journey.
Yeah, it was. I was actually talking to my husband this morning, and I'm like, okay, here's the topic. Here's what we're going to, and he was really good to remind me that in the beginning, we had people who are supporting us, obviously, who were like, yep, we believe in you. But he said, when you have a new idea for something, he was like, you really need to have two types of people. You need to have your people who are like, yes, you can do anything. And then you also need to have your people who are like, but yeah, I have a lot of questions here. And he was like,
that speaks to our tribe. We had an earlier episode about find your tribe. You need those two different types of people in your tribe.
Yes,
you totally do. And he's like, and if you can convince the people who are the question askers about your idea, he's like, then you have something really special. And he's like, for me, it was, getting Edward on board, who was a really good friend of his, who had led in the C-suite at Under Armour, just a really brilliant guy. He was like, when I got him on board and believing in what we were doing, he was like, that was the moment for me that I knew what we were doing, had the legs to go. That small beginning looked like interviewing a lot of development shops for us, because we didn't have any tech background. We didn't have any technical, maybe experience or go to school for computer science or know how to program or know how to code. We just knew what we wanted it to feel like and be. And that's even evolved since we first started as well, from what we've learned and what we've experienced. But yeah, he interviewed like 4 or 5 different development shops. We picked one that we felt really, really good about. They did not execute on
This would be a
our
flops and a failure.
plans. Yeah, I was like, it was.
How do I say this lightly?
Yeah, how do I say this lightly? We brought in, pitched our idea, got investors, pulled some investment capital together, hired a development shop to start working on our vision and our idea. We did that all throughout 2019. We come to the end of 2019 and we're like, hey, wait a second. This doesn't feel like what we had talked about and what we had thought we were working toward. And so some back and forth there. And then they basically said like, well, this is what we're giving you and this is what we're delivering. And it was not a product, which is what we had expected. It was just a demo of a product. So there was no real back end to the product. It looked really pretty, but it's still just an idea. And kind of fast forward with me and Stadia, which was where Kerry and I met, is like, I'm going like, am I supposed to stay here? Am I supposed to like hand this off to Lord? Like, what are you? This is like all in like a 2-year time period where I'm like handing off our church. Then and then I felt very called by God to hand Bloom off and to put that down and join Josh, like full time on Flourish. That was 2020, March 2020, April 2020, and my kids are like coming home, and I'm like. And at the same
homeschooling.
Homeschooling, our company, our business idea, like we're out of money and no one's really wanting to invest because the whole world is uncertain about the future. And
that's right.
Yeah, I would say that was one of the harder moments because we had taken this huge leap and then felt like, oh, where are we at now? Like, how's this gonna keep going?
Those are the moments that you have to fall back on that piece that you said earlier that you would have to revisit time and time again throughout this pathway that you've been on. 100%.
Did we hear you wrong, God? Did we?
Yeah, exactly. You're just like, have you left us out to dry? Like, where are we?
Is this our sign to stop?
Yeah, exactly. And you asked that. I mean, 100%. I feel like I've asked that question no less than 10 times or at least. Are we supposed to stop here? And I feel like every time God's provided a way through or a way out or a way around, and you're like, okay, we're still, I always say to my husband, like, we're still doing it. Like, we're still at it. So I guess we're not, and I can't think of doing anything else. I'll get to those moments where you're like, should I apply for a job now? Like, and we keep doing this on the side. And I mean, I've definitely brought up the resume several times over the past 4 years and been like, okay, is this the moment? And somehow, some way, God provides another way through.
Wow.
I think that's important too, to talk about. It's not faithless to question. I think that's important. Like, we're allowed to ask God those hard questions. And sometimes he shows up in very obvious ways. And sometimes it's probably, there's silence on his end, and that we just have to keep being obedient to take that next step of faith. And that's what this whole walk with Jesus looks like. Faith, right? It's not clear. Oh my gosh, it's so helpful to hear all of that, because I think that's going to be encouraging to somebody on the other end. That's like, did I hear you? Am I supposed to be doing this? Do I get my resume out? I mean, I've had that. I mean, I'm a nurse by training, and I can't even tell you how many times that I get those LinkedIn come through, like they're hiring and like some bonuses and salaries. And I'm like, I should just call it in and just go ahead and change back to what I was doing. It's like when Jesus went back up to heaven, the disciples, what they go back to doing? They went back to fishing.
Right.
This is a wash. It's like, no, come back, get back to the call, get back to what I've purposed in your heart to do. So that's good.
You just mentioned, Sarah, you said 4 years. So that, I mean, that's a long time from an idea that you're so excited about to when it actually launched. So it actually launched pretty recently. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, like 2 months ago. So so fast forward through 2020, we ended up getting, I'll just say this part real quick, invited to a like a hackathon. It's essentially like a marathon for coders.
Interesting.
Fascinating.
Yeah, fascinating. Through an organization called Faith Tech, actually, and met our one of our technical founders. His name is Neil, and he has continued to stay with us. And anyway, it's incredible that all came together. We were able to get a little bit more funding to kind of like limp along. That wasn't until August, but it was like a lot of holding our breath. And in September of that year, I was like, I really feel like I am supposed to be our COO and really take a more definitive role with our company. And my husband was like, I've been waiting for you to say that. I'm like, okay. He's like, I wasn't
about time.
I was like, yeah, exactly. He was like, about time. It's like, yes, please. So I always feel like my call of my life has been putting legs on dreams. And
that's awesome.
And coming in at that beginning piece to say, okay, like, how can we bring structure to this chaos? Bringing order to chaos. And I like the beginning stage. I can look back over my life and I'm like, okay, yep. At the beginning of that, putting in the foundation and then letting God do what he wants to do with it. But we fast forwarded to 2021. We hired our first developer to work with us specifically. And I think that was the best move we could have ever made, was having someone that we work with day in and day out. And I always say, I'm like, you are such a unique person, because he's very young, but he is an incredible leader, and he is able to translate vision into a practical application and even execute as well, which it's like you're creative and you can execute and you can translate.
A unicorn. That's
you're
a unicorn right there.
100%. I always tell him, like, there's not a lot like you, Matt. Just so you know, he's not for sale. Nobody steal him. But yeah, he's been with us and helped us really shape and hone our idea. And we launched it just about a month and a half ago, Kerry. And I was finally like, we've been testing all throughout 2022. And I was like, okay, it's not perfect, but it is time to like really let the world know we have what we've been up to. We've been kind of quietly working behind the scenes and oh man, trudging through. My husband saying, like, there's a book called The Messy Middle. So he was like, that is one resource I would totally recommend to people, because it just feels like our messy middle has lasted like 4 years is what it almost feels like. So
well, and I remember you saying, so you just said that it's not perfect, or we just had to like launch it. We just had to go. So tell me, how did you come to that decision? Because we work with a lot of women specifically. In fact, we just had a conversation this morning that she's like saying all these things, and we're like, just do it, just go, just move, do on one of the things that she had this million thing list, and can feel so overwhelming, but sometimes you just have to go, or it's not perfect, but I just have to go. Like, talk about that. And how did you guys come to that decision? Was it a unified decision? How did it make you feel? All those things.
It was I do feel like it was I'm trying to think. I'm like, yes, unified. I think my husband is more he's a one, so he's definitely like, I know how I want it to look. He's a reformer, visionary. I think the hardest part for him was going, I see what it's going to be or what it can be, and the reality of where we are today is feeling like I'm not able to offer the thing I want to be able to offer in the future.
So hard.
So I could see for him, I feel like it was a lot harder to say, okay, we're launching, even though it's like new and fresh and we know it works and we know it's needed. And there might be kinks and there might be bugs that we have, that's tech language for like there might be things that aren't working quite right, but you sometimes don't know that until people start using what you've built. And
Apple does that. Apple, look at Apple.
No, I get bug fixes all the time on my phone.
I mean, even one of the largest tech industry companies of our time will upgrade and do an update. You don't know until they put it out there.
Exactly.
So that's really encouraging, I think.
Yeah.
Go ahead. No,
I was just gonna say, whenever Instagram has like a bug, Josh's like, I'm so glad they have a bug. It makes me feel so much better.
Validated in your failure. Yes.
It's like, even the big companies have their moments of like not having everything figured out. So sometimes I'm like, for us, new small beginnings, it's like just start. And sometimes you'll learn the bugs, and sometimes you'll learn you want to do it completely differently. Because of starting. So
I think that speaks to my next question as we kind of wrap up here, but the encouragement piece. So if you could leave just kind of a nugget of like a truth bomb, an encouragement bomb that you could just hear, like, watch what I've done, take a note from your playbook. What would you tell the listeners or people watching online to be encouraged?
Yeah, it's a super good question, Angela. I feel like it would be the idea of just go, just start, just take that next step. And I say that like sounds really cliche, like take that next step, because it's like some days it's just putting one foot in front of the other, literally, like getting out of bed and doing something today that moves you just a little closer.
That's good.
Something that has helped me a lot. There's Michael Hyatt has the Full Focus Planner, and there's not a commercial for him, by the way, but I will
we can put it in the show notes though. That's fine.
Not sponsored. Sure. Not sponsored.
But I'm not a great. I always get like, I'm a 3 and I'm a perfectionist too, so I'm like I putting goals down on paper really like gives me a lot of angst, and so but having the like weekly goal and then 3 things I can do today to get me closer to that goal.
That's good.
That's been really practically very, very, very helpful for me, and encourages me a ton. And I will say too, like sometimes you have to give encouragement away before you feel it.
That's good.
Yeah. And at times I'll go like, okay, who is someone I can encourage today that I just tell them I'm thinking a bit about you, praying about you. And that like, it's one of those like cyclical like things where you start to feel encouraged yourself because you've given something, even something you feel like you don't have, and how God just continues to give you what you need to make it through that day.
It's an upside down kingdom. It's a weird biblical principle that to give, to receive. It's
hard to describe because there's so much mystery around it, but we know it to be true in our lives.
But sometimes it's like, it's okay to not have everything perfect, and also to keep moving, even if you feel like you failed, because I've certainly been in that spot where I'm like, that just did not go at all how I wanted it to go or how I hoped that it would go. And God given me for this year the verse about his grace being enough and his power being made perfect in my weakness. And it's like, okay, every time I feel like I don't feel like I have enough, or I gave enough, or it worked out the way I hoped it would. I didn't do that even near as perfectly as I was trying to. I'm like, okay, grace, like your grace is enough. Your power is made perfect in my weakness. And I just need to let go of it and let you work it all out the way you're planning and wanting to. And
I'm kind of over here having a little mind blown moment because I just have taught on that verse.
Oh,
it's
wow.
crazy.
Okay.
And that the power made perfect in weakness, that word perfect is teleo in Greek, and it means to be lacking nothing, complete and to the full. And so when we are in our weakest place, he is in his fullest. And so there's something really encouraging about that. And I'm like, all right, God, here you go, showing off again. So I mean, that's a truth bomb right there.
It is. And I think even yesterday, I'm like admitting that to God, like, I feel really weak. I need to call a person that I'm like, it's going to take a lot of energy from you, Lord, or
The newfound introvert, right?
And I'm like, oh, and I'm like, okay. I'm like, but Lord, your power is made perfect in my weakness, and I'm going to just depend on you, and I'm going to make this phone call. And if they pick up, I will know that you will fill me up. And if they don't pick up, I will just take that as I've done my part today.
Well, I think that's such a good revelation. We have to do our part, even when we feel like we've come to the end of something. There's a responsibility that we have in the calling to do the next step, whether it's, do that low hanging fruit for the day, get out of the bed and shower, do the load of laundry, do the thing for the kids, or do that one project that you have that's kind of been nagging, but just sit down and put the work in. You got to do your part. So
100%. Yeah.
Kerry, you want to kind of wrap us up here with this last piece?
Yeah. Well, I've so enjoyed this conversation. I feel like as we've been talking, I've like come up with a million more questions. So maybe we'll have you on again, but
that'd be great.
It's been a great conversation, but I would love for our audience to be able to find you guys if they are in the Annapolis area, or if they are loving this concept that you guys have of connecting people together. How are they going to find you on the socials, or if you want to give us an email, just let us know all those things.
Yeah, 100%. You can find me personally at Sarah J. Burnett, which Sarah with an H. You can find our company at Flourish OS on Instagram and Facebook, as well as LinkedIn. And you can find our website at onflourish.com and or me at Sarah@onflourish.com. So those are the ways you can connect with us and find us. We would love to chat with you.
onflourish.com. All right.
Like, are you on Flourish? Yeah.
Good. That's good.
Yeah.
Well, Sarah, we are just so appreciative of you being here, sharing your journey, encouraging our listeners. I know Kerry and I can speak probably for Kerry, that we're both encouraged just hearing the journey and just how the messy middle, sometimes it's not always beautiful or glamorous, but when you stay in the call and you stay faithful to what the Lord's asked of you, there is a beautiful harvest. There's a beautiful flourishing that comes from it. So thanks for being here with us.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate the time, and thanks for listening.
Absolutely. And to all of our fellow warrior raisers, aim your arrows well. Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you enjoyed our conversation, please go ahead and like and share it. You can also find us on www.warriorraiser.com.